I went to a small college tucked into the woods of northern Massachusetts. Autumn there was like no other when the first winds blew. The forest seemed to catch fire, the leaves turning red, yellow, and falling down the ancient stone steps. Every time I walked across the courtyard, the dry leaves crunched underfoot like burning paper. No one spoke loudly in the fall. Every sound was hushed, as if not wanting to disturb the things sleeping in the cold brick walls. My dorm was called Holloway Hall, a red brick building from the early 20th century. The walls were cracked, the ceilings were low, the hallways were long like tunnels. Whenever someone closed a door, the sound would echo through the entire floor. It was said to have been a military hospital during the war. I used to laugh, thinking it was just a story students made up to scare each other on Halloween. But the fall of my senior year, I was in room 313, and I stopped laughing. Room 313 was at the end of the third-floor hallway, next to a window overlooking the woods behind the school. My roommate, Mark, was an art student, thin, messy-haired, quiet, always wearing headphones and staying up all night to draw. I was an architecture major, so I was used to working late into the night. We lived quietly, sometimes only hearing the sound of pencils, the sound of paper turning, and the wind blowing through the window. Mark once asked, "Do you hear anything at night?" I asked, "What?" "Footsteps, like someone walking down the hallway, then stopping in front of my door. When I opened it, there was no one." I laughed. "Probably a student on another floor. The walls are old, the sound echoes." He was silent, nodding, but after that day, I noticed that Mark started wearing headphones even when he slept. One night, I was working on a drawing when I heard a click. The doorknob turned very lightly, then stopped. I looked up and looked. The doorknob still vibrated, the old metal clanking softly like a whisper. I walked over and opened the door. The hallway was empty, the yellow light spilling onto the tiled floor. In the middle of the floor was a small piece of paper, folded in half. I bent down to pick it up. Inside was a line of writing in thin, slanted strokes, the letter E long. "Don't leave the door open too long." I thought someone was playing a prank, so I dropped the piece of paper on the table and continued working. The next morning, it was gone. From then on, things began to change. The next night, I returned from a late class to find the door slightly open, the desk lamp still on. I was sure I had locked it. There was a circular streak of water on the floor, reflecting the light. I knelt down and touched it. It was icy cold. The ceiling wasn't leaking. The windows were closed. Outside, the fog was thick. Mark came up behind me, looked at the streak of water, and said, "It could be condensation from the heating pipe." But his eyes were uncertain. I reached for a towel to wipe it off, but he stopped me. "Don't. Look." In the water, there was a reflection, a blurry, tall, thin figure, like someone standing at the end of the hallway. When I looked up, there was nothing. I turned on the ceiling light, and the water disappeared right before my eyes. Mark didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he moved down to the second floor. I asked why. "I don't want to hear anyone walking outside the door anymore," he said. I stayed alone from then on. The nights that followed were quieter, but strangely quiet, the kind where you know someone is holding their breath on the other side of the wall. I worked late into the night, then fell asleep on my desk. When I woke up, I found the door slightly ajar. The wind blew, making the paper on the desk tremble slightly, as if someone had just walked out. I thought I'd forgotten to lock it. But then, every night was like that. No matter how many times I locked it, the door was still ajar in the morning. One night, I dreamed of the hallway of Holloway Hall. The lights flickered, the yellow light was cold, the space was full of steam. At the end of the corridor, There was a woman wearing a hospital gown, her wet hair stuck to her face, holding something that shone dimly like a metal card. She walked towards me, walking slowly, her eyes unblinking. When she was a few steps away, she said, "You left the door open." I woke up with a start. The door was still ajar. The next morning, I went to see the dormitory manager. He was old, hunchbacked, and had a hoarse voice. When I told him, he just smiled tiredly. Room 313 was abandoned for a dozen years before you came in. The electricity was weak. The wires were short-circuited. No one dared to stay there. I asked, "Who lived there before?" He looked at me, longer than usual. "A student named Evelyn. In 1978, she was on the night shift in the medical wing of this building. It was terribly cold that winter. They say she forgot to lock the door. The wind blew in, and then she passed out in the hallway. The next morning, it was late. I asked again. Her name was Evelyn M., right?" He paused. "Yes, how did you know?" I didn't answer. "Because the night before, I found a rusty metal tag on the table, engraved with the words EM 1978. I was going to change rooms, but some part of me couldn't leave. That night, I decided to stay up until morning. I sat at the table, only turned on a small light, and looked at the door. There was no sound, just the wind and the slow ticking of the clock hands. Then, around 2 in the morning, I heard something like wet footsteps on the stone floor. I looked at the doorknob. It turned, very slowly. The door opened, and the wind rushed in, carrying a damp, cold scent like breath. Outside, the corridor was white fog. In the fog, a figure stood thin, in a white shirt, head tilted. In her hand she held a card, the light reflecting off the metal surface. I don't know why I wasn't afraid, I just felt pity. She stood there looking at me, her eyes no longer angry, just sad. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "Don't leave the door open for too long." A strong wind blew, the light went out, and her figure disappeared into the mist. I closed the door and sat on the floor, panting. In my hand, I still held the cold card. In the morning, the card disappeared. I left Holloway that same day. As I left, I looked back at the 3rd floor. The window of room 313 was closed. 3 years later, I returned to visit the school. Holloway Hall had been sealed off for demolition. The bricks were rotten, the roof collapsed, and moss was almost everywhere. But as I walked across the courtyard, the wind picked up, and I saw the curtains on the 3rd floor swaying slightly. A dim light was coming out, like an old desk lamp still on. I stopped and looked up. For a brief moment, I saw someone's face in the window, dim, tilted head, wet hair, empty but gentle eyes. I wasn't afraid. I just nodded slightly as a greeting, because I know there are people who have never left the place they used to live, just to watch over a door, afraid that someone will forget to lock it again, and the autumn wind will blow in again. As autumn drew to a close, I left the city to find a quiet place to finish my first manuscript. A friend showed me a small house in the town of Stillwater, located next to the lake of the same name. I rented it for 2 months, October and November, before the snow fell. The house was secluded, down a dirt road to a low meadow that led to the lake. The lake was wide and calm, and in the afternoon the setting sun burned red on the water. I liked the feeling. Peaceful, solitary, just what I wanted. The landlord was a woman in her 50s with prematurely gray hair named Eleanor. She handed over the keys and gave me a small warning. If you hear a knock at night, don't open the door. It's windy here. It's a prank." I laughed, thinking she was trying to scare the tenant. But later, I realized it wasn't just a warning. I moved in one afternoon in late October. The house had 2 floors. The ground floor had a living room, a kitchen, and a window overlooking the lake. The upper floor was an attic bedroom, low-ceilinged and smelling of dry wood. Everything was clean but felt like it had been deserted for a long time. Dusty plug sockets, cracked wooden door frames, and an old photograph hung in the corner of the stairs. A misty Stillwater lake, with a figure standing in the distance, his back turned. The first night, I lit the fireplace and sat down to write. A light rain fell on the porch. The smell of burning wood mixed with the dampness of wet leaves. Around midnight, a soft knock sounded. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times, evenly spaced. I thought someone had gotten lost. I opened the door to find only a thick curtain of rain and steam rising from the lake. When I returned to my desk, I saw a small drop of water coming from the window, but it was still closed. On the floor, a faint watermark in the shape of a bare foot went from the window to my desk, then disappeared. I thought I had seen wrong. But the next morning, the spot was completely dry, without a trace of mud or sand. I wrote constantly in the days that followed. The house began to get used to people, or so I thought. There was a thick fog every night, and Stillwater Lake almost disappeared under the milky white. Sometimes I heard someone calling across the lake. The echo was long and distorted by the wind. One morning, I found an upside-down china cup on the porch, a circle of water smeared on it, and in the cup was a wet piece of paper, scribbled, "Can you hear me?" The handwriting was thin and slanted, not like Eleanor's. I laughed dryly, thinking to myself that the children around here were playing. But that day, when I stopped in town to buy something, the cashier said, "Children, there are only a few old people's homes left in the lake area." That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind blew through the crack in the door, sounding like breathing. At nearly 2 a.m., there was another knock, 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 3 times. I sat still, not opening it. The sound was silent. I was going to the kitchen to make tea, but when I went down the stairs, I saw a figure passing by the window like someone walking along the lake shore, holding a lamp. The small, milky light swayed in the wind. I opened the window and looked closely. In the mist, there was indeed someone walking. A woman's figure, a long dress reaching to her knees, her head slightly bowed. I called out, "Miss?" No answer. The person walked straight down to the water's edge, and in an instant, the light went out. The next morning, I went out to that spot. The grass was wet, no footprints, but there was a woman's shoe lying on its side, moldy, so old that the leather was cracked. Inside were a few long black hairs. I took the shoe and threw it in the trash can behind the house. But the next night, it was on the porch steps again, dry, clean, as if freshly cleaned. I felt uneasy. I called Eleanor, asking if anyone had lived here before me. She was silent for a moment, then said, "This house belonged to my daughter. She never liked winter. She went down to the lake every night, no matter how many times I told her to. One year, the fog was so thick, they never saw her again." I froze. "Did you find the body?" "No, just the shoe." Ifazshilent. The next night it rained heavily. The sound of water hitting the roof was like 1,000 little hands. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. Then the knocking came again, louder this time. Knock, 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 clearly right at the front door. I didn't dare go out. About 10 minutes later, it stopped. I sat up, my heart pounding. Then there was a small, steady sound, like water drops falling. I looked down at the end of the bed. The floor was wet. A line of bare footprints on the wood led from the door straight up to where I was sitting. The last one stopped right at the edge of the bed. The air was so cold that my breath turned to mist. I looked around, the light bulb flickering, and from the corner of the room, a woman's voice, small and thin, as if someone were speaking through steam. "You heard me." I got up, threw off the blanket, turned on all the lights, but there was no one. The watermark was gone. On the table, the china cup lay upside down again, and underneath was a wet piece of paper. "Don't let me sink again." I didn't stay another night. Early in the morning, I packed up and left Stillwater. When I handed over the key, I asked Eleanor if she ever heard a knock at the door at night. She looked straight at me, her eyes blurred. "It only knocks when it feels someone is listening." I was silent. She thrust into my hand an old photograph, the one I had seen hanging on the stairs. Stillwater Lake covered in mist, a silhouette standing with its back turned. On the back, in faded blue ink, it was written, "Don't open the door until the mist has lifted." A few years later, I had the opportunity to return to the area to take documentary photos. Stillwater Lake was fenced off, no swimming allowed. The old house was gone. Only the cement floor and a few sunburned walls remained. I stood on the shore, looking at the mirror-like surface of the lake. The wind so light it barely stirred a ripple. In the depths of the lake, I saw a small point of light, then another, then more like dim lights from below the water. I wasn't sure if it was a reflection or someone walking along the bottom of the lake, carrying an unburned lamp. I turned away, but a soft tapping sound came from behind me, 3 evenly spaced. Knock, knock, knock. When I looked back, there was no one, just a white porcelain cup sitting upside down on the cement floor, and a circular stain of water below. I used to work at a small station called Maple Hollow, deep in the valleys of northern Vermont. It's a pile of red bricks now, but 10 years ago, I was the last one on duty there. I remember the cold of that first fall when I got my shift. The tracks stretched out into the maple woods, the leaves were falling, and the wind beat against the windows like someone was tapping a steady beat. During the day, the little town was deserted. At night, the only sounds were the ticking of the wall clock and the crackling of charcoal in the stove. The station was built in the early 20th century, when steam trains were still in use. The brick walls were cracked. The telegraph board was covered in dust. The clock stopped at 11:45, and the wooden racks still held unsold paper tickets. I was hired because they needed someone to guard the train until the line was officially shut down. That first night, as I sat taking notes, I heard the distant whistle of a train through the woods. Long, low, dragging, then gone. I turned on the radio, just static. I thought it must be wind blowing through the power lines or distant sounds, but I heard it every night. The day shift leader, an old man named Harris, said, "Everyone who works nights here can hear it. Think of it as an echo of time." He laughed, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I got used to it. Every night I cleared the table, lit the oil lamp, and walked along the platform. The fog was so thick that I couldn't see the signal poles a few meters away. When the headlights of cars passed the highway in the distance, the light slid across the station walls, casting long shadows like people walking. In the corner of the duty room, there was a calendar from 1986. October still hanging, the corner scorched, and the last day 31 circled in red pen. I tried to take it down, but the paper was as brittle as ash and crumbled at the slightest touch. One midweek night, I was listening to my old radio when the lights went out. Outside on the platform, the train bells were ringing softly, though there was no wind. I went out, carrying a flashlight. It shone through the milky mist. I walked down the hallway, past the dusty benches, and suddenly I heard the loudspeakers the system had long since broken. The 47 to Brattleboro will depart at 11:45. Please pay attention. I stopped dead. The clock on the wall was still dead, its hand stuck at 11:45. Then, in the distance, there was a metallic clank, clack, clack, clack of the train wheels on the rails. I ran out into the yard. A faint yellow light appeared at the end of the track, then grew clearer. Hot wind blew in my face, the smell of oil smoke, and a whistling sound like a train braking. As the light passed me, everything went out. The platform was dark again, but on the wet tile floor, a row of small shoe prints clearly visible, going from the edge of the yard to the door of the duty room, each step steady, wet, cold. I told Doris, the woman who cleaned the station during the day. She just smiled sadly. You're the fifth person to hear it. Everyone who works at Maple Hollow has heard the train at night. They say it was the 47 in 1986 that crashed on the curve near Whitmore Woods. The last car fell into the ravine. Most of the people died. I asked, did anyone survive? Only the conductor. He said there was a girl in the last car who kept looking at her watch, as if waiting for the departure time to come again. I asked her name. Doris whispered, Elise Marchand. She was a ticket seller at this station. I began to notice things. The ticket board in the duty room was sometimes misaligned. The mirror in the bathroom was always foggy even though I didn't turn on the water. And every now and then I smelled old perfume lavender mixed with oil smoke. I thought I was tired, but on the night of October 30, it came back. As I was checking in, the loudspeaker came on. The 47 to Brattleboro will leave at 11:45. Please board. I stepped out, the fog so thick I couldn't see the tracks. Then a yellow light appeared, like a streak of fire through the fog. The sound of steel wheels grinding so real it shook the ground. An old black train appeared. The rows of cars were dimly lit. In each window, I saw silhouettes of people sitting, heads bowed. When the train stopped, the door of the middle car opened. A woman got off. She wore an old uniform, a dark skirt, a rusted name tag, E. Marchand. Her hair was long and wet, her skin pale, her lips almost colorless. But her smile was very slight. Do you have a ticket? I shook my head. Then you should stay. This train only picks up people who have left but not yet arrived. She finished speaking and turned back to the car. The yellow light flashed. The door closed. The wheels rumbled, and the train passed me, fading into the mist. In my hand, when the light went out, was a wet paper ticket. The edges scorched, written in smudged ink. Train 47, Brattleboro, 31 octobre 1986, Elise M. I still have that ticket. The next morning, I showed it to Doris. She didn't say anything, just looked at me for a long time. I believe you now, she said softly. Because Elise used to live in the little room behind the station. After the accident, they cleared out her things, and all they found was the half-burned ticket. You have it. I quit my job right away. But years later, when I passed Maple Hollow, I still stopped. The station was half-roofed, the rails rusted. I walked in, looked around. The old calendar still hung. The clock still at 11:45. The wind blew, dust flew, and in the distance, the train whistle sounded again, long, faint, deep, as if from another world. I stood on the platform covered with yellow leaves, in the late afternoon, and in the thin mist, I saw the shadow of a woman in a dark shirt, holding a signal light. walking along the tracks. She stopped, turned towards me, smiled, then continued walking until she disappeared into the white space. I did not run after her. I knew that was the shift she had never left. As for me, I was just the one who happened to be standing at 11:45, when the boundary between the old trip and the new trip had just opened.